Act 1. The Incense of Fate. Look at him. Just by stepping into the pavilion, his lotus pheromones completely stabilized the Visect Master's corrupted spiritual energy. His purity is terrifying. I gracefully swept the heavy sleeves of my pale lavender silk robes, gliding across the white jade floor of the Imperial Medical Sector. I was Lian Zhen. At 25, I was not simply an herbalist. I was the bearer of the legendary Celestial Lotus Core, a phenomenon that appeared once in 10 generations. My face was a work of divine art, my amethyst eyes drawing the gaze of every king and cultivator in the realm, and my natural scent of blooming lotus and mountain honey was so intoxicatingly potent that I had to wear heavy magical sashes to suppress it. Even then, the world melted at my feet. But behind this mask of a flawless medical genius, I was running a dangerous, classified investigation against the deep corruption within the High Council. And today, the Emperor had just sent a massive obstacle straight into my path. The air turned into pure ice, vibrating with an overwhelming, absolute authority that forced every disciple in the courtyard to drop instantly to their knees in fearful reverence. It was the scent of frosty cedarwood and black amber, a dominant, predator-like alpha aura so lethal it could crush a cultivator's soul from miles away. Walking through the grand pillars with slow motion, majestic dominance was Jared Cross, the immortal commander of the Divine Fleet, a 300-year-old war god who had slaughtered 10,000 demons without a single scratch on his flawless white silk armor. He was devastatingly handsome, his liquid silver hair flowing behind him like a waterfall of starlight, his grey steel eyes scanning the whole with absolute, cold indifference. "Your medical logistics are highly inefficient, Cultivator Lian," Jared spoke. His voice was a deep, velvet baritone that rumbled through the floorboards like thunder. He didn't even look at me, his long fingers resting on the golden hilt of his dragon sword. "You spent 5,000 spirit stones on importing rare moon grass just to flavor the sector's daily tea. It is unoptimized, a chaotic waste of imperial resources." My long, dark eyelashes fluttered as I took a slow step forward, my natural lotus scent suddenly flaring up, piercing through my suppression sashes like a golden blade. The sweet honey met his dark amber, creating a sudden, violent crackle of tension in the air. "A waste, Commander Cross," I laughed, my voice echoing like silver bells in the silence. "That moongrass tea permanently expanded the spiritual pathways of your entire Vanguard division in 20 minutes. You cannot calculate the divine miracle of true healing with a dry administrative ledger." Garrett slowly raised his head, his sharp grey eyes locking onto mine for the very first time. His flawless, frozen porcelain mask cracked for a fraction of a microsecond as his dominant alpha instinct slammed into the pure, blinding royalty of my Omega Core. He adjusted his heavy golden dragon crown with one finger. "The metrics of this sect require discipline, Lian Zhen," Jared murmured, his tone dropping into a dangerous, dark whisper that made the entire courtyard tremble. "Rewrite the financial report by sunset. Perfectly. Or I will lock your medicine halls under Imperial seal." Internal monologue. Lian, I hate him. I absolutely, fundamentally despise his arrogance. He thinks he can command me just because he's an immortal war god. He has no idea that I am tracking the same traitors he is looking for. Just you wait, Jared Cross. I am going to bring you to your knees, begging for a single drop of my scent, if it's the last thing I do. 7:30 p.m. The rain outside was relentless, washing over the dark tile roofs of the capital. I sat inside the private, deeply shadowed White Lotus Pavilion downtown, looking breathtakingly alluring in a loose, casual violet silk robe that exposed just a hint of my smooth, white jade collarbone. My best friend, the chief royal diplomat, had practically dragged me to the secret meeting. Lian, the informant who has the encrypted ledger of the High Council's illegal corruption funds, agreed to meet you tonight, he had whispered. He'll be wearing a dark silk coat, and he'll place a gold-etched vintage pocket watch on the table so you can recognize him. Be careful. I took a slow, melodious breath, my slender fingers tracing the rim of my porcelain teacup. My natural lotus scent was tightly bound by my sashes, but a faint, sweet trail of mountain honey still drifted in the warm air. A secret spy meeting. It was dangerous, high stakes, and exactly what I needed to bypass the Imperial guards. The temperature in the tea room plummeted to absolute zero. I turned my head with slow-motion grace, my amethyst eyes widening in sheer, unmitigated horror as a tall man in a long, luxurious black silk coat stepped through the private partition screen, shaking the raindrops from his shoulders. He moved with an absolute, majestic rigidity that made my heart violently stop. He reached up, his long, pale fingers adjusting the heavy gold dragon crown on his head. His silver ash hair flowed over his shoulders like liquid starlight. It was Jared Cross. The immortal commander marched straight toward my private booth. With absolute precision, he pulled a heavy, gold-edged pocket watch from his vest, placed it gently on the dark wooden table, and slid into the cushion directly across from me. He locked his piercing grey steel eyes onto mine. In a fraction of a second, his flawless, emotionless mask completely shattered. "Lian," Jared rasped, his low baritone voice cracking slightly, completely stripped of his military control. "Cross," I shrieked, slamming my hand onto the table, my lotus scent instantly spiking from the sudden shock, filling the small enclosed room with a thick, intoxicating aroma. "What the hell are you doing here? Are you utilizing Imperial spies to track my private location now?" "Tracking your location?" Garrett sneered, his shock instantly transforming into a cold, possessive glare as his nostrils flared, taking a slow, deep breath of my honey-sweet pheromones. My underground agent told me he was introducing me to a brilliant, undercover shadow expert who has infiltrated the medical black market. He neglected to mention he was sending me a loud, hyperactive nightmare who treats a financial audit like a declaration of war. "A nightmare?" I gasped, my face burning with pure, beautiful indignation. "My friend told me I was meeting a sharp-witted, refined rebel gentleman. You're not a gentleman, you're an iceberg. I cannot believe the informant I'm supposed to cooperate with is the most insufferable alpha in the entire empire." Jared stood up abruptly, throwing his black coat over his shoulder. "This operational alignment represents an absolute 0% efficiency rate. I am leaving." "Sit down, Jared," I hissed, reaching across the small table and grabbing his forearm. The moment my fingers touched his skin, a massive, roaring wave of raw spiritual energy exploded between us. The instant, absolute resonance of our golden cores. The smell of frosty cedarwood and blooming lotus collided so violently that the paper screens of the teahouse began to vibrate. But before Jared could pull his arm away, the ground beneath our feet shook with a terrifying violence. "The structural arrays are collapsing. The demonic miasma is toxic." The patrons shriek from the hallways, fleeing in absolute terror as black, corrupted smoke poured through the shattered floorboards. Assassins from the corrupt High Council had tracked us down, launching a lethal ambush to destroy the evidence. "Lian, get out of the building! Now!" Jared roared, his silver hair flying wildly as he drew his legendary glowing dragon sword, a magnificent, massive shield of cold blue-time magic erupting from his shoulders to block the falling, burning roof beams. "I have a celestial core, Jared. I don't run from a fight," I shouted back, my amethyst eyes flashing as the pure raw light of my healing magic fully awakened. A brilliant, blinding wave of golden energy and the scent of white lotus blasted outward from my body, completely neutralizing the toxic demonic poison in a single second. "The enemy has sealed the spatial coordinates of this room. We must synchronize our cores to break the firewall barrier." Jared didn't hesitate. He stepped straight into the roaring vortex of dark magic, marching right next to me, his large, warm hand slamming down over mine as we both grabbed the ancient array stone on the table. The physical contact was an absolute, divine explosion. The moment our hands touched, our pheromones and spiritual energies perfectly melded. A spectacular, roaring supernova of gold and deep purple light blasted outward, completely disintegrating the assassins and restoring the entire teahouse to flawless, immaculate condition in a single microsecond. The absolute, perfect harmony of our fated connection had manifested a miracle. System alert. Warning. Fated soul binding detected. Dominant alpha and celestial omega synchronization status. Permanently linked. I opened my eyes, gasping for air as the light cleared, but I didn't just see the room anymore. Inside my own head, I could hear the rapid, frantic, and mathematically perfect military thoughts of Jared Cross. And inside his mind, Jared was screaming in pure, unoptimized terror at the sudden, overwhelming flood of my own deep, proud emotions. Internal monologue, Jared's voice echoing inside Lian's head. Get out of my tactical directory, you chaotic idiot. Get out of my mind. Internal monologue, Lian. Oh, gods. I'm locked in his brain. And why? Why does his alpha instinct think I look breathtakingly beautiful in this ruined silk robe? Act 2. The Arcite Protocol. Of all the medical appraisers in the Central Ministry, Lian, your data profile is the most chaotic. Yet, I am forced to drag you through this pass. Jared's razor-sharp, deep baritone sliced through the quiet interior of the luxury spirit carriage. He sat perfectly upright, his long, pale fingers resting on his silver sword sheath. He had discarded his heavy white outer armor, sitting in just his tight white silk tunic and dark vest. His sharp profile looked like it was sculpted from ice against the dark, flashing thunderclouds outside the carriage window. "Oh, I am deeply sorry, Commander Cross," I snapped back, my amethyst eyes flashing as I crossed my arms tightly, my lavender robes wrinkling beneath my grip. "You ordered this sudden expedition into the Black Peak Mountains just to verify my moongrass inventory. Don't act like I enjoy being trapped in a tiny wooden box with a 300-year-old human glacier, whose entire vocabulary consists of the word efficiency." Garrett didn't look at me, his grey steel eyes fixed on the misty mountain path ahead. The spiritual data dictates that the local ley lines are destabilizing due to the rogue demon we encountered at the pavilion. Your Celestial Core acts as a necessary containment buffer. It is a logical allocation of Imperial assets. Nothing more. A buffer. I let out a melodious, sarcastic laugh that echoed like silver bells. You haven't changed since the day you arrived, Jared. You treat every living soul like a number on a military ledger. You think you can analyze my healing magic with a dry audit? I can analyze any variable through the lens of tactical discipline, Lian Zhen. Jared retorted smoothly, his voice dropping into a dangerously low, clinical drone. "Whoa!" I gasped, losing my balance completely. Before my body could slam against the hard wooden wall, Jared's hand shot out with supernatural, military speed. His powerful arm wrapped firmly around my waist, pulling me straight against his hard, solid chest. The sudden physical contact sent a violent, thumping wave of temporal energy through our intertwined minds, our synchronized golden cores flaring to life. The heavy, suffocating scent of his frosty cedar would instantly envelop my lotus pheromones. The carriage groaned, tilted sideways into a deep muddy ditch, and stopped completely. Outside, the rain began to pour down with a furious, hammering vengeance. Jared slowly looked down at me, his grey eyes piercing through the dim amber light of the carriage lamp. Our faces were inches apart. Optimization status: 0. The mountain axle is fractured, the spiritual transmission is offline, and we are officially stranded in a high-risk perimeter. What is your spontaneous vision for this scenario, Celestial Omega? I forced myself to pull away from his warm grip, my face burning a deep, beautiful crimson as I straightened my robes. My vision is to walk into the rain so I don't have to spend another microsecond sharing your air, Commander. We have exactly one vacant room left, Masters. Take it or spend the night freezing in the mountain pass, the grumpy lodge owner had told us. And now we were standing inside room 10 of the summit pavilion. A dreary, outdated wooden cabin that looked older than the Empire itself. The air smelled of damp pine. A low fire crackled in the stone hearth, and right in the center of the room, mocking our corporate and spiritual war, was a single, massive bamboo mat. Jared stood perfectly rigid by the door, holding his golden dragon sword like a shield. His sharp jaw was tightly clenched, his grey eyes scanning the singular bed with intense, calculating disapproval. "I will occupy the stone floor," Garrett stated firmly, his rigid military drone returning with a vengeance. "Jared, you are 6'2", and the floor is literally covered in freezing stone tiles," I sighed, stripping off my wet outer sashes and throwing them near the fire. I collapsed onto the edge of the bamboo mat, running a hand through my long dark hair. "Look, we are professional adults. And after our disastrous realization at the teahouse, we already know our minds are permanently linked. We stay on our respective sides. No corporate arguments, no inventory fights." Garrett stared at the mat, his analytical brain processing the lack of viable options. With a heavy, deeply resentful sigh, he finally took off his golden dragon crown, placing it neatly on the wooden table. He unbuttoned the top 2 buttons of his white tunic, exposing the sharp, elegant lines of his throat. Without his crown, his silver hair flowed freely, making him look shockingly vulnerable and infuriatingly attractive. He slid into the far left side of the mat, lying perfectly straight, his arms crossed over his chest like a fallen god carved from marble. The silence stretching between us in the dim amber glow of the fireplace was thick, suffocatingly heavy. Because of the twin-core protocol, our minds were still completely transparent to one another. Internal monologue Lian's thoughts leaking into Jared's head. He looked so different without his armor. His shoulders are tense. He's carrying 300 years of war on his back, and he refuses to let anyone see him rest. Internal monologue Jared's voice echoing inside Lian's head. Stop analyzing my physical parameters, Lian Zhen. Close your directory and go to sleep. I can't sleep when your brain is running 1,000 military simulations, Jared. I whispered into the quiet room, turning onto my side to look at his sharp profile. In the teahouse, when the demon attacked, you didn't hesitate to step into the vortex to shield me. Why? You claim I'm just a chaotic waste of resources. A long, agonizing pause followed. The only sound was the crackling of the firewood. Because a commander does not allow his most valuable asset to be compromised, Jared said quietly, his voice losing its robotic, clinical drone, replaced by a raw, heartbreaking loneliness. For 300 years everyone in this empire has looked at me as a weapon. They fear my sword, they obey my orders, but they never see the man beneath the silver hair. But you, from the moment I stepped into your medicine hall, you didn't drop to your knees. You looked me dead in the eyes and fought me. You treated me like a living variable, Lian. Even if it was to yell at me about tea. My heart did a painful, violent, and utterly unauthorized flip. The arrogant, ruthless war god who had tortured my department with audits was just a deeply lonely soul who had waited centuries for someone to treat him as human. I'm not trying to fight your structure anymore, Jared, I whispered softly, my voice dropping into a tender, passionate warmth. As I reached my hand across the mat, my fingers stopping just a millimeter away from his knuckles. You don't have to carry that cold shield around me. I see you. Jared's breath hitched. Slowly, deliberately, he flipped his hand over, his long, pale fingers firmly wrapping around mine, intertwining our hands with an intense, burning heat that made my entire celestial core hum in perfect synchronization. Go to sleep, Lian, Jared whispered softly, his gray gaze locking onto mine through the dark with an unyielding intensity. We have an empire to restructure tomorrow. The next morning, we arrived at the Grand Bazaar of the Northern Province to source the core components for the stabilizing arrays. The town was packed with elite cultivators, but as Jared and I walked through the crowded streets, we were the ones stopping traffic. With my long dark hair and amethyst eyes, and Jared's towering frame and silver hair, we looked like two deities walking among mortals. The inventory variance in this market is 30%. Jared murmured, his golden dragon crown firmly back on his head, his face a flawless mask of corporate indifference. Senior Appraiser Lian, I cannot believe my luck. A smooth, arrogant voice interrupted from a nearby luxury booth. We turned around. Standing there was Prince Ethan, a highly ambitious, incredibly handsome 23-year-old alpha cultivator from the Northern royal family. He had messy dark blonde hair, an athletic warrior build, and a confident, radiant smile. He marched straight past Jared, stopping right inside my personal space, his amber eyes locking onto mine with an immense, unmistakable amount of flirtatious admiration. I've read all your imperial medical treatises, Lian Zhen, Ethan beamed, taking my hand in his. He didn't just give a standard professional handshake. He held my hand with both of his, leaning in close, his voice dripping with smooth charm. Your beauty is truly as legendary as your intellect. I was hoping that after you finish your audits today, you'd allow me to host a private banquet in your honor at my palace? I'd love to examine your theoretical methods more closely. Internal monologue Lian. Oh, oi. He is laying it on thick. He's totally trying to flirt with me to get a direct imperial endorsement for his family's herb trade. Prince Ethan. The temperature in the entire marketplace plummeted to absolute zero. Jared slowly marched forward, his tall, imposing frame completely blocking the sunlight. The terrifying, heavy dark energy of the immortal commander erupted from his shoulders, so thick that Ethan instantly took a step back, gasping for breath under the sudden, suffocating gravity. Jared stepped directly between us, his massive frame physically breaking Ethan's grip on my hand. He locked his grey steel eyes onto the young prince, his face a mask of absolute, lethal, and possessive rage. Cultivator Lian's administrative time is an exclusive asset of the Emperor's Central Executive Division. Jared spoke, his deep baritone carrying an unyielding, terrifying stillness that silenced the entire marketplace. His schedule is completely optimized for imperial synchronization, not social entertainment. Your flirtatious variables represent a high-risk liability to the crown. If your focus remains unoptimized, I will personally terminate your family's trade licenses before the sun sets. Move. Ethan gaped at him in sheer, unmitigated terror, completely crushed by the raw, dominant alpha authority of the commander. I apologize, Commander Cross. I will respect the parameters. I leaned back against a wooden pillar, my face burning a deep, joyous crimson as I watched Jared coldly dictate the final trade rules to the terrified merchant guild. The clinical, robotic boss who claimed human relationships were just variables had just completely weaponized his imperial power out of pure, primitive, and defensive jealousy. Through our mental link, I could feel the absolute chaos inside his chest. A raging, possessive storm that had nothing to do with budgets. And right then, looking at his broad shoulders, I knew my timeline was permanently locked to his. Act 3. The Broken Firewall. If these spatial logs are correct, the corruption wasn't executed from the outside. The encryption arrays were unlocked from within my own medical ministry. I stood leaning over Jared's broad shoulders, my long fingers gripping the edge of his mathematically organized ward desk. The grand pavilion of the Divine Fleet was completely empty, shrouded in the dark blue shadows of midnight. The only source of light was the cold, mystical blue glow of Jared's projection arrays, reflecting sharply off his face and the gold lines of his dragon crown. Jared didn't answer immediately. His pale, elegant fingers moved across the glowing runes with a terrifying, rhythmic military speed, pulling up deep system arrays. His sharp jaw was tightly clenched, his posture unyielding. The spiritual override occurred at exactly 6:14 p.m. Lian Zhen. Jared spoke, his smooth baritone dropping into a dangerously calm, low drone. Precisely 14 minutes after you and I left the building for our dinner at the Tea Pavilion. The unique spiritual signature utilized to access the forbidden ledger belonged to the newly appointed royal trainee. Prince Ethan, I whispered, my amethyst eyes narrowing as my usual playful, medical genius facade completely vanished, replaced by a cold, protective rage. The young alpha from the northern sect. I knew his flirtatious admiration at the marketplace was a bit too perfect. He wasn't trying to charm me for an imperial trade endorsement. He was using his close proximity to clone my Celestial Core token. A highly effective, low-intelligence espionage strategy. Jared countered smoothly, his grey steel eyes locking onto mine through the dark. He reached out, his warm, strong hand briefly covering my trembling fingers on the desk, squeezing them with absolute reassurance. He underestimated my local defensive nodes. The moment he cloned your key, an automated phantom array cloned his entire spiritual traffic. Can we bring this evidence to the High Emperor tomorrow morning? I asked, my heart doing a wild, anxious flip as our shared mental link pulsed with adrenaline. The Emperor is currently executing a mandatory isolation meditation in the closed peak. He is unreachable for the next 48 hours. Jared sighed, leaning back and resting his chin on his steepled fingers. If Ethan realizes we are monitoring him, he will destroy the remote ledger, and the corrupt faction will launch their corrupted spiritual siphon on Friday morning. Your ministry will be legally destroyed before the quarterly audit. I leaned down closer, my face inches from his, looking directly into his intense grey eyes. Then we don't wait for the Emperor, Jared. We deploy survival strategy number 3. When the enemy thinks they have the data, you rewrite the parameters of the game. Jared stared at me, a rare, breathtakingly beautiful smirk slowly breaking through his icy armor. You truly are a chaotic variable, Lian. What is your spontaneous vision? We let Ethan think he won. I smiled, a dangerous spark igniting in my amethyst eyes. Tomorrow morning I will accept his invitation and take him out to an exclusive private lunch at the Royal Pavilion to keep him away from the archives. While I'm busy keeping his eyes on me, he uses backdoor arrays to purge the stolen data. When the corrupt elders try to activate the siphon on Friday, they won't open a multi-million-dollar treasury. They'll open a spiritual dead end. Jared's gaze intensified, his hand sliding up my wrist, his thumb resting directly over my racing pulse point. The romantic tension in the dark office was sudden and suffocatingly heavy. Playing the distraction role with an alpha who has designs on you represents an unacceptable risk index, Lian Zhen. I do not approve of him standing within your personal space. He's an insect, Jared, and I am the head of the Imperial Medical Prikaz. I whispered, leaning in until our breaths mingled in the quiet dark. Besides, my compatibility index is already permanently locked to a certain 300-year-old human glacier. Nobody else stands a chance. Jared let out a low, soft chuckle. A sound that completely melted my heart. Before pulling me down by my silk collar, his lips meeting mine in a deep, passionate midnight kiss that sealed our secret operational pact. I have to admit, Appraiser Lion, I was incredibly surprised when you accepted my private lunch invitation at the Jade Phoenix Bistro. Prince Ethan beamed, leaning across the low wooden table with a radiant, intensely confident grin. He had discarded his formal sect uniform, his dark blonde hair perfectly rumpled, his amber eyes locking onto mine with undisguised flirtation. Most senior executives keep their distance, but you're just as approachable as you are breathtakingly beautiful. Call me Lion, Prince Ethan. I smiled smoothly, utilizing my maximum golden boy charm. I swirled the spiritual tea in my cup, keeping my amethyst eyes bright and fully engaged, though my brain was counting down every single second on the room's grand water clock. 1:15 p.m. Jared had been inside the core vault for exactly 45 minutes. Lion, then, Ethan murmured, his voice dropping into a lower, suggestive pitch. He reached his large hand across the table, his fingers casually creeping toward mine, attempting to brush against my knuckles. You know, the rumors on the sales floor say you're completely untouchable. They say your rival, Commander Cross, has some kind of icy hold over you. But looking at you now, I think you just haven't met someone who knows how to properly appreciate your royal energy. Internal monologue, Lion. Wow. The arrogance on this kid is unbelievable. He really thinks his cheap charm can bypass my defenses while he sells our company out to the corrupt elders. Just smile, Lion. Keep his hands busy so he doesn't check his communication talisman. Commander Cross is just highly focused on structure, Ethan. I laughed off, smoothly withdrawing my hand to pick up my teacup, blocking his advance with absolute professional grace. He thinks everything can be solved with a spreadsheet or a military audit, but I prefer a more personal connection. Tell me more about your work with the Northern Branch. I heard your data migration speeds were exceptionally fast. Ethan's eyes flashed with a subtle hint of triumph, thinking he had completely fooled me. Oh, I can move information faster than anyone in this building, Lion. In fact, by the time this quarter ends, I think I'll be running this entire department. With you right by my side, of course. Ethan's smile suddenly froze. He pulled his glowing jade talisman from his silk sleeve, his eyes scanning the burning text runes. My heart slammed violently against my ribs. Did Jared get caught? Did the server arrays alert him? I watched as Ethan's amber eyes widened in confusion, then absolute panic. The confident, flirtatious intern look vanished instantly, his face turning an ashen pale. He began frantically typing on his talisman, his knuckles turning white. This is statistically impossible. The source directories are shifting. I leaned back against the silk cushions, crossing my legs, my friendly smile transforming into a cold, victorious smirk that cut through his panic. Is there an error in your data traffic, Intern Ethan? I asked, my voice dropping its playful edge, carrying the absolute weight of a top-tier closer who had just finalized a trap. Perhaps your copied tokens are experiencing a synchronization error. You see, Jared Cross didn't just build our firewall. He wrote the original security code for the entire Northern Sect database 10 years ago before he became commander. You didn't steal our software, Ethan. You just gave Jared a direct backdoor to download your entire corrupt faction's illegal strategy. Ethan gaped at me in sheer, unmitigated horror, his talisman almost slipping from his trembling fingers. You knew? The entire lunch. It was a setup? Consider it your final performance evaluation. I smiled, standing up and tossing a high-grade spirit stone onto the table to cover the check. Pack your bags, Ethan. HR is waiting for you in room B. And try not to sob on your way out. It affects our department's morale. I rushed out of the restaurant onto the high open-air pavilion roof, the mountain wind catching my lavender silk robes. The rain was heavy, but the air felt clear, purged of Ethan's suffocating alpha pheromones. I stood by the stone balustrade, catching my breath, when a dark silhouette stepped out of the shadows. It was Jared. He had left his armor and dragon crown behind, his long silver hair damp from the storm clinging to his face. His black silk tunic was unbuttoned at the collar, exposing his sharp collarbone. Without his armor, he looked raw, dangerous, and devastatingly handsome under the flashing lightning. The ledger has been safely deleted, Lian Zhen. Jared spoke, his deep baritone cutting through the sound of the rain. The corrupt elders have no data left to execute their coup. The crisis is optimized. You came all the way out here in the storm just to tell me that, Commander. I teased, a soft, nervous laugh escaping my lips as I stepped closer to him. Jared didn't answer with words. He marched forward, his long, pale fingers aggressively catching my jaw, tilting my face up. His grey steel eyes were burning with a fierce, possessive, and completely primitive alpha rage. Through our twin-core mental link, I could feel the residual, territorial fury inside his chest from the moment he watched Ethan try to touch my hand. I told you I did not want him within your personal space, Jared whispered, his voice shaking with a raw, intense emotion that completely stripped away his 300-year-old military armor. I spent centuries telling myself the relationships were just an unoptimized liability, Lian. But today, the thought of that insect holding your attention made my entire system malfunction. I do not care about the metrics anymore. I don't want a rival. I want you. My heart hammered violently against my ribs, an ecstatic laugh escaping my lips as I gripped his wet sleeves tightly. The protocol is officially broken, Jared. Permanently, Jared murmured, his lips closing the final distance, melting into mine in a passionate, deep, and desperate kiss under the pouring mountain rain. Our golden core synchronized in a brilliant, silent flash of golden and purple light, sealing our unarchived destiny forever beneath the roaring thunder. Act 4. The Sovereign Covenant. We returned to the Imperial Palace under the cover of the morning mist, the signed treaties and the decrypted scrolls firmly secured in my lavender sleeves. By all corporate and military logic, our operational synchronization should have been celebrated as a historic victory for the Empire. But the High Council was a nest of ancient vipers. Lian Zhen, Garrett Cross, step into the circle of judgment. The Prime Elder's voice boomed through the grand conference hall, cold, echoing, and heavy with suppressed spiritual energy. I shot a quick glance at Jared. He had already put his golden dragon crown back on, his face returning to that familiar, unreadable Ice King mask. But as he marched forward, his knuckles were tightly clenched against the hilt of his sword, his inner alpha preparing for a strategic strike. We stepped into the center of the white jade room. Surrounding us were dozens of elderly, corrupt counselors, all draped in heavy crimson silk robes, looking down at us with malicious satisfaction. Care to explain these metrics, Commander Cross? The Prime Elder demanded, throwing a glowing text scroll onto the glass table. Our network diviners have discovered that right before you left for the northern province, an unauthorized spiritual override was executed from your central terminal. Someone leaked our private treasury archives directly to our enemies. The digital and magical footprint points straight to your personal encryption key. My blood ran cold. The ghosts of Jared's past, the ancient betrayal by his named brother 300 years ago, were staring him right in the face again. They were trying to use his own traumatic history to break his public reputation. The data you are reviewing is a fabricated illusion, Jared spoke, his voice dropping into that absolute, deadpan, and lifeless military drone. He didn't even blink behind his perfect composure. I did not access the server core on Tuesday evening. My personal log shows. Your personal log shows a complete system bypass, Commander. The Prime Elder sneered, standing up and pointing a wrinkled finger at him. You are an immortal genius, yes, but you grew sloppy. You allowed your judgment to be clouded by your obsessive attachment to Cultivator Lian. Mr. Vice Emperor, Jared Cross has compromised the Empire's security. He must be stripped of his military clearance, his sword confiscated, and Lian Zhen must be blacklisted from the medical ministry forever. I will submit my immediate resignation, Jared whispered, his voice completely flat, hollow, and broken. He reached up, his fingers trembling slightly as he prepared to unclamp his dragon crown. Lian Zhen had nothing to do with this override. The Northern Sect contracts are secure. I will take full executive liability. No, you damn well won't, I shouted, my voice slamming into the jade walls like a divine bell, my hyperactive, celestial energy turning into an explosive protective fury. I stepped directly in front of Jared, my lavender silk robes flaring as I slammed my hands onto the glass table. Mr. Vice Emperor, this entire audit is an absolute joke. Jared is mathematically perfect. He would never leave such a clumsy, traceable spiritual footprint. Someone framed him because they wanted to steal the chairman's bonus and hide their own financial treason. Lian, stop, Jared murmured behind me, his warm hand catching my shoulder, trying to pull me back to protect my position. Do not compromise your core for a lost variable. I am not letting you walk into their trap, Jared. I turned around, looking straight into his grey steel eyes, my voice carrying an absolute, fated conviction. You told me numbers don't lie. So let's look at the actual numbers. Think, Jared. If someone overrode your terminal, they had to be past the local proxy server arrays. Where would the primary analog backup be stored? Jared blinked, his sharp grey eyes suddenly widening behind his crown as my chaotic, beautiful energy forced his frozen, defensive brain back to life. A dangerous, brilliant spark of the immortal war god returned to his face. He shoved his fingers into his digital tablet interface. The basement utility grid. The physical network switches keep an automated analog log of every single physical spiritual signature connected to the floor routers at that exact minute. Can you extract the data? I asked, a huge, triumphant smile breaking through my anger. Jared's posture went perfectly straight, his voice returning to its confident, deep baritone. If I wrote the core firewall protocols for this entire palace, Lian, I know exactly where the backdoor logs are stored. It takes precisely 8 minutes to compile. Do it, I cheered, turning back to the shocked counselors with my maximum sales charisma. Mr. Vice Emperor, give us 10 minutes. If we don't bring back the real thief, you can execute us both. 4:52 p.m., 8 minutes before the final audit deadline. We were inside the cold, glowing server room in the deep vaults of the palace. Jared's pale fingers were moving with a ferocious, blinding, and terrifying speed across the glowing terminal rooms. The mechanical clicking of the keys sounded like an upbeat battle rhythm. I stood right behind him, guarding the door, releasing a steady wave of my blooming lotus pheromone to keep his stress levels perfectly stabilized. The progress bar on his screen hit 90%, 95%, 100%. Beep. The local jade printer whirred to life, spitting out a single sheet of paper scroll. Jared snatched it, his eyes tracking the analog timestamps with mathematical precision. Got you, Jared murmured, a cold, victorious, and dangerously handsome smirk crossing his lips. We marched back into the grand executive boardroom, slamming the double doors open at exactly 4:58 p.m. I threw the fresh scroll directly over the Prime Elder's forged files. Here is the physical network router log from Tuesday evening, sir, I announced, my voice carrying the absolute victory of a top-tier closer. The data transfer didn't come from Jared's terminal. It was transmitted from a mobile Wi-Fi dongle physically plugged into the router switch in the basement. And the unique spiritual signature belongs to the Prime Elder himself. The Prime Elder turned as white as a sheet of paper, stumbling backward as the Vice Emperor snatched the scroll, his eyes widening in pure rage. Prime Elder, your own spiritual signature. God. Escort this traitor to the dungeon immediately! Freeze his entire family's asset portfolio! As the corrupt old man was dragged out of the room screaming, the Vice Emperor looked at the two of us. letting out a long sigh of relief. An immaculate optimization of resources, gentlemen. The Northern Sect contract stands, and the chairman's bonus belongs entirely to the two of you as the Empire's ultimate closing team. Congratulations. The entire boardroom erupted into wild, deafening applause from the remaining officials. I turned around, my amethyst eyes bright with pure, ecstatic joy. Forget the corporate rules, forget the imperial protocols. I lunged across the space, wrapping my arms tightly around Garrett's neck. Garrett caught me securely by my waist, lifting me slightly off the ground right in front of the entire High Council, a rare, radiant, and incredibly beautiful human smile finally breaking through his stone mask as he held me tight against his chest. At 00 p.m., the Grand Executive Sales floor of the Ministry was completely empty. The harsh fluorescent lights were turned off, leaving the room illuminated only by the warm, amber glow of the city lights streaming through the giant panoramic windows. I was sitting on the edge of my grand mahogany desk, my long dark hair slightly messy, my lavender button-down silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar, my tie and sashes discarded onto a stack of signed contracts. Garrett walked over from his private lounge, smoothly holding 2 cups of fresh mint-infused espresso. He had left his white armor and glasses behind, his black silk vest tightly fitting his broad shoulders. The final metrics have been logged, Lian, Jared murmured softly, setting the cups down and stopping just 2 inches away from me. His grey steel eyes were filled with an intense, burning warmth that made my stomach feel entirely too light. The market valuation of our combined sectors has increased by 34% this afternoon. As a closing team, our synchronization index is officially uncalculable. Is that your official administrative evaluation, Grand Commander Cross? I teased, a soft, happy laugh escaping my lips as I reached out, my fingers gently tangling in his dark silver hair, pulling him closer. No, Jared whispered, his strong, warm hand sliding around my waist, pulling me securely into his firm, unyielding embrace until our chests were perfectly touching. This is an absolute, permanent, and unarchived lifetime contract. The war is officially over, Lian Zhen. I don't want a rival anymore. I don't want a shield to keep me safe. I just want to spend the rest of my timeline with you. Approved without any modifications, I whispered, my eyes fluttering shut as he leaned down, his lips melting into mine in a passionate, deep, and lingering kiss that sealed our futures together forever. The spreadsheets were gone, the hidden shields were shattered, and the cold Ice King had finally found his perfect, chaotic harmony.